Hey, how's it going everyone, and welcome to my React.js crash course. This is 2025 and we're going to move on now from HTML, CSS and JavaScript and go into React.js territory. Of course, all of you have been waiting for this one. Now, this is just going to be a guide. We are going to go over the crash course in this video and then we're going to follow up with some projects. Also, we're going to give a couple of examples in this crash course, but the guide is designed to help you quickly get up to speed with React, of course, covering the essential concept and the best practices. Whether you are a beginner or looking for a fresh new start with React, this guide will provide you with a solid foundation and best practice tips. So you will also hear me talking out of my nose because I'm still battling here with my cold, but we're basically going to cover the following things. So first of all, we're going to have our major part is going to be talking about what is React. Then we're going to set up React, install Node.js and NPM. I hope you already have some basic knowledge, if not, about NPM and Node.js. If not, there's a video down in the video description. Also, we're going to have the entire PDF and the entire blog post on my Substack. That said, I'm moving away from my blog to Substack, and there's where you always find all of the information that we're talking about each and every video, also code bases, so far and so on, and the links to each and every project to the GitHub repositories. So we're also going to learn how to create a React application. Then we're going to go over the little project structure that we're going to create here. Then we're going to learn about JSX and JavaScript XML. What are components, using props, give some examples there, using state, using use hooks, useEffect hook, how we can style in React, CSS files, inline style, CSS modules, conditional rendering, lists and keys, of course, in React forms and input handlings, for organization, testing basics, deployment, and useful packages. Now, there's also a chapter 2, which is React routing using the React router and DOM router. And we're also going to have a project for this one, but this one is going to follow up after 2 videos. So hope you're excited, and let's just get started with what is React. Now, at some point, as JavaScript developers were fed up with writing the same code and the same code snippets, they came up with the idea to create some sort of a framework, or they called it a framework. Basically, a framework is Angular. React is more like a JavaScript library for building user interfaces maintained by Meta, aka Facebook, Instagram, so on and so on. So it was initially created by them in order to create a single page application. By the way, Meta is also the company that invented the infinity scroll. So you can scroll, it never ends. Now, React allows you to build reusable UI components, this is what's so powerful, and manage the state of your application. We're going to talk about what is state a bit later on. So why should you use React? Now, as I said, it is component-based, so it has a component-based architecture. It has a virtual DOM for more faster rendering, and it has reusable code, of course, because we are reusing each and every bit of code that we can. For example, you create a card component, you can reuse it to infinity, and it has a massive ecosystem and a massive community. So wherever you're stuck with React, you're always going to find a solution. Now, when it comes to setting up React, first of all, you need to have Node.js and NPM installed. That's extremely simple. If you want to take a step-by-step approach to that, just check out the video in the link in the description. But you're basically going to go to nodejs.org, and from here, just download and install Node.js. Okay. Now, after you've done that, we're going to move away from React, from this website, and open up Visual Studio Code. So I'm going to use Visual Studio Code. If you want to use another code editor, please feel free to do so. Now, Visual Studio Code has something called the terminal. Whether you are on a Mac or on a PC, the way you activate the terminal is the following. You go up here and select terminal, new terminal. It's going to open up the terminal. Oops. You can also delete terminals here, or just hold down Control tilde on a PC and Command tilde on a Mac. Okay, this is going to open up the terminal. Now, this is important. Also, by the way, these folders and files that you see here are part of the Learn Web Development for the Beginning, which is the series that you're watching right now, or this video is in that series. So if you want to start right from the beginning, go ahead. This is an entire playlist. Go back to the beginning. I'm starting Node.js. What is HTML? What is CSS? So far and so on. So we are going to create now a new folder, or you're going to create wherever you want a new folder. We're going to call it, here, I'm going to call it, and you need to be careful here because you're now in React. When you're using folders for React, you need to use hyphen in order to find words between them. So React crash course. In order to navigate to be in this folder, just have to cd. Now, if you created this folder on the desktop, just drag and drop it in here. And what you need to look for is if you're situated in that folder. So I'm going to use change directory space. Tab is going to give you all of the folders that you already see. I'm going to go into my Learn Web Development. You don't have to do this, but from here, I'm going to go into cd once more, React and tab, and this is where you should be situated. So be in this, you need to be in this folder. If you're not figuring this part out, as I said, just create you can do the following thing, just create a new folder. Here, as you can see, new folder, call it React crash course. And you can take this folder, just drag and drop it. You're basically in that new folder. You open up your terminal, you're going to see that you are in React crash course folder, in the React crash course folder. So I'm going to go back to my previous folder, make this just a bit larger, and voila. Now, still need to cd into learn. So this is just for me, React. Boom. There we go. So as soon as you are in that folder, we need to install React. Now, the way we install React is by using a command in the command line. That is npx create -react -app space. And now you need to type in the name of the application that you're creating. Now, because this is just a simple React beginner-friendly crash course, we're going to call it my app. Later on, you're going to call it a to-do list, a weight-watching application, whatever you want to call it, or whatever you're building. But for now, we're just going to call it my app. So enter. And it's going to start the process of installing things. I'm going to hit here, yes. As you can see here, this is going to install the package. This might take a couple of minutes, blah, blah, blah. Installing React DOM is very important. Actually, everything is important. Rest scripts and your templates. Now, we're also going to go over the folder structures. If you take a look in your folder, you're going to see files and folders being created. The node modules are extremely important because this is going to contain all of the modules that React will use. The package.json file, which is, there we go. We'll show you what kind of commands or dependencies were installed. Now, for example, it's also going to tell you that the name of the application is my app. This is the version 0.1.0. It's private. The dependencies are the testing libraries, React, and we're using now version 19.1.0, the React DOM with the same version, React scripts, so on and so on. These scripts will be run down here in order to build, in order to start your React application. In order to build your project, you're going to see at the end of the cache when you're building. So when we are delivering this as a true application, you're not going to use your source folder, which is right here, src, to deploy it, but you're going to use the build version. You run the test script in order to test something and eject or ejecting out of your application. So that's it for now for the package.json. Now let's go a bit over the folder structure. So your main folder is actually this my app. It contains the modules. It contains this public folder. This is where as soon as you build your application, you're going to see this populated, or not here. Actually, this is where you're going to store your public. So the public folder is where you're going to store your public files like images and favicons and so on and so on. And your source folder is where you're going to do your magic and work in your application. Now, I'm going to change this just a bit in order to get up to industry standards. So basically, let's go into app.css. The app.css is where the main style of the application is designed or configured. The app.js is your main application file. So everything that you're going to do for your application will be stored in here or written in here. You're going to create multiple files then later on, like components and so on and so on. You're going to bring them in here. The way you bring them in is by importing them. You're going to learn about this just in a couple of minutes. The app.test is from where you can test a new application. The index.css is actually a file that you don't need, but it's just a basic style for your index.js, because you can see here, it's going to be imported in the index file. Now, the index file is the exiting point. So index.js is the exiting point of your application. This file will take, this is very important, will take the HTML document, which is up here in public. This document is going to look for one ID. This is this div with the ID of root, and we have it. back to the index file. I have too many things open, so I'm just going to close everything up. So we're going to create an element. It is going to create an element, a variable called root. Go to the folder, search for the document, and within here is going to find the ID with the ID of root, and then it's going to take that root variable and render to it your application. Okay, so simple as that, and then that's pretty much it. You can run your application. Now, you know what? Let's start React. Let's start the React application. You're going to go down in the command line. You can type in clear everything up, and now you can type in, to start the application, you're going to type in npm space and start. That's all you need to do. And you're going to get an error. The reason is when you want to work within an application, you need to change directories to be in that application. So from here, you need to cd into my-app, hit tab and enter. Okay, now you're in your application. Now you can run your npm starting the development server, and this will automatically open up your default browser, where is Google Chrome. I would suggest Google Chrome. We're going to use a couple of tools from here and run your application. Now the application will run on the localhost port 3000. So that's already too much information, far too detailed for a crash course. So I'm going to drag and drop it here to the side, take my code to the left side, and well, let's work in React. So I'm going to close this index.html up, index.js up, and we're going to work within the app.js. So let me take you quickly through what you see here. We have a div with a class of app and a header with the app header. An image is basically brought in using up here import logo from logo./logo and the extension svg. When you're importing images, it's very important to define the extensions. So if you have a JPEG, tell it that it's a JPEG. If you have PNG, tell it that it's a PNG. Very important. Then we have a link down here and so on and so on. So what I'm going to do, take everything that it's actually div right here and delete it. Hit enter, and this is going to destroy my application. Not going to work. Now, let's just create one simple element. I'm going to create here an h1 and just type in hello world, hello world. Okay, hit enter, and your application should work again. Now, what you're going to see here is a simple hello world in the h1, but what we just wrote is actually not HTML code, but it's JSX. So JSX is a syntax extension that allows you to write regular HTML-like code inside of JavaScript, because this is basically JavaScript. Now, a very important thing, this is not a tip, but it has to happen this way. Each and every element that you create, function of app is actually an element, needs to return one single parent element. So each and every JSX code needs to return one element. So for example, if I would type in here an h2 and change this to React, h2 or paragraph tag, even better, paragraph tag, my par, you're going to see an error, which is going to tell you that, well, it's going to tell you a lot of things, but the problem is that these are now two elements. So want to fix this, you're going to return a div and move both of those elements within that div. And now voila, hello world, my par. Just type in lorem ipsum, lorem, enter. There you go. There's your paragraph. Now, if you don't want to use a div, you can delete it, leave it like this. And this is basically a fragment in React. Now, we're not going to talk about fragments here. If you want to learn more about React, obviously you can check out the entire course that is down in the video description for complete beginners. But this helps you return what I want here. Actually, if I would just start here now, a unordered list with a couple of list items, mama, so far and so on, copy this, paste it, still going to work. Okay, so this is the way JSX works and also React works. It always needs to return one element. So now let's talk about components. Now, a component is a UI piece. In React, we use mostly functional components. As you can see here, function, then the name of the component. Naming conventions are really important. Always use capital letters to name your components. Components, open up your folder here, should be always created in a component folder. So we're going to go into our source, new folder. We're going to call this components. You can see React already, or your code base here already, Visual Studio Code already recognizes this. So let's create here new file. Right-click new file, we're going to call this welcome.jsx. Open this one up, and now we're going to create a function. We're going to call it welcome, open and close parentheses, open and close curly brackets, and this always needs to return something. So we're going to return the h1 with hello and world, exclamation mark. It's saved. Now we also need to export this function. So the function just leaves here on its own. But in order to bring this function in here in our application, we need to export it. So we're going to export. And when you're exporting components, not just functions, you need to use default keyword before that, and then the function name, welcome, open close parenthesis, go into your app, and right here you can just import now the name of the function. You have to rename it here, and then you need to tell it from where you're importing it from. So we're importing it from open and close quotation marks dot / basically we're moving outside of our application, we're moving into the components folder, and there is where the welcome component is located. In order to use that component, I'm going to comment this part out. So if I save now, you can see that the title just disappeared, or that H1. Now in order to use my component, I'm going to go right here underneath a paragraph, above a paragraph tag. Well, when you're using components, you need to use them as following. So less than mark, then the name of the component, welcome, close it up, and voila. Oh, well, hello world reappearing here. Oh, and if you're getting an error, by the way, when you're exporting the file, always be careful to use the right name. So the same name with capital letters, everything that you used here to define the component. Now, another way to export this is just not doing it here, but as soon as you define the function, so export default and write this, and you're going to get the same result. Now let's talk about a couple of best practice tips. Always start as I already mentioned, your component with a capital letter, and keep components as small as possible and focused on the one job that you're doing. Now let's move to props, or properties, also known as profs. This will allow you to pass data into your components. So for example, if I want to pass this string of hello world into my welcome, so I want to be able to change it, then we're going to go to our components, right here within the open and close parentheses, we're going to open up curly brackets and type in the name of the prop. In this case, I'm going to name it message. Now, instead of this world, I'm going to use my message property and replace world with just message. Now, in order to use this, we're going to wrap it into curly brackets. And you can always see that hello and just exclamation mark because the word world disappeared. Now, you can also add default properties to or assign default values to your properties. So I'm just going to assign here equal to and a string of world. Hit enter, you're going to see the world reappear. If you want to change this, for example, now we're going to use the actual prop. You're going to go outside the application where you define where you're using your component. Now you have access to that. If you hover over it, you're going to see that you have a component that has one prop here. The prop is message and it can be a string or undefined. So we're going to use that message prop, and now you can assign any value that you want to it. For example, hello Norbert. And let's just change the value. That's it. Or hello Norbert from React. Hit enter, you're going to see that value changing. So that's basically how prop works. Now let's talk about state. And I'm going to delete everything that I did here. Just leave that message hello world component. In order to use state, first of all, we need to import it from React. So I'm going to import React, comma, open and close curly brackets, and use state. Now this is a hook, and the state is a building object for managing components data. So this is an object. In order to use the state, is kind of just imagine that you have a function that has two arguments, and you're going to destructure it and assign it to a variable. Now, in order to use a state, we're going to first of all define it as const, open and close square brackets, and you're going to have a value and a setter. But the value will be always what you define the state as. Let's say count, comma, then the setter, which is going to reset the value when you're using that function. So you're always going to, well, the naming convention is to use it as a set, at, and count. Okay, so the value and the setter of the value. And this you're going to assign to the useState hook, open and close parentheses, and there you go. Now you can assign default values to this little fellow. Whatever you type in this parenthesis, for example, an empty string, that is now its value. You also type in a number if you want. So first of all, let's check out how this looks. I'm just going to leave this hello world as it is. But now I'm going to create a paragraph tag and I'm going to type in here count, just regular string, and then hyphen. And I'm going to use this value count down here. So I'm going to open and close curly brackets and type within them count. Okay, so you're just going to see here count and nothing appear. Let me just zoom in a bit. It is empty. Now I could pass in here string, Norbert, but that's not what this means. This actually, from naming conventions here, it will expect a number. So I'm going to replace this string with a number of 0. Now I'm going to create a button and just type on it increase, or let's type in count. Count. So if you want to count this, you're just going to click it, and this should then change its value, the state. Now, in order to use a click event in React, you don't have to add an event listener or so on. So you just type in on, click. We're using camel case now. We're going to use now an arrow function, open close parenthesis, and then we're going to use this setter, set count, and whatever we pass in this parenthesis, for example, count and +1, each time we're going to trigger this function is going to add 1 to its initial state of 0, basically going to change the state, and as soon as I click it, it's going to turn to 1. If I click it again, it's going to turn to 2. So we're just manipulating the state by reusing this function. Now, one very important thing, this is not being stored. So the data from the use state is not being stored. So if I refresh here, it's going to return to its initial state, which is 0, because this is what we set it. So let's use now another hook, which is useEffect. Now the useEffect hook allows you to perform side effects, for example, data fetching, DOM updates, so far and so on. So let's just bring in also useEffect. I'm going to come up here where I have my useState, hit a comma, and bring in useEffect. I'm going to create another state here, const. I'm going to call this seconds, comma, and set seconds. Okay, we're going to assign it to useState, and the initial state will be again 0. I just messed up here, seconds. Yes, I did. Now, in order to use useEffect, you have to be before the return, and just type in useEffect, open and close parenthesis. Within here, we're going to use an arrow function, and this time we're going to use a variable of interval. We're going to name it interval, and now we're going to use the built-in function of set interval, and each time this happens, we're going to set seconds. So we're going to use the setter here to whatever the initial state is, and just update it by seconds +1. And this will happen, so close up, and this will happen here, comma, every 1000 milliseconds, so each and every second. Now, in order to use this, we're going to go underneath our count. Let's just type in here in our paragraph tag. I'm going to use here time and use the initial state, seconds, and also an S here just to type out seconds. I can see it's already taking effect. If I comment this out, it's going to return to 0 because that's the initial state. Now, we also have something called a cleanup function and a trigger. I want this to be triggered whenever the state changes. So you can define this by using these open and close square brackets. And now you can see it triggers it each and every second. You can also clean up your function, and it's very important, by typing in return and then use an arrow function and just clear interval, and I'm going to clear up that interval was created here. Okay, so pretty simple. Now let's move away from this. I'm going to use learn how to use styling in React. So you see this app.css being imported. Basically, this is importing from this CSS file, just a regular CSS file, whatever CSS you're typing in here. For example, if I want to make my background dark, then, because this is targeting the .app class, go back to our app here, main application, and remember where we had a div here with the class on app? Now, I'm going to retype this, so div class, and you can always see something. So we're not typing in class, but you're using class name. This is basically the naming convention is used in React. And if I type in here app, hit enter, you will see that now we're using the style that is associated to the app.css file. Basic text, line center, app logo is no longer needed, app header is no longer needed. So I'm going to delete everything that is underneath of this little fellow. Now, if I want to change the background of the application, so background color, and let's say aqua, there we go. We just change the background color. If I want to change this, change its height to 100%, then I also can change it from here, or just change it to 100 viewport heights. There we go. Because 100% only takes up 100% of its initial container. So simple as that. This is how you write CSS in React. You just write it in your app.css file, or if you want to rename it to something else, feel free to do so. Now what I'm going to do is comment this out, because you're going to have the code then later on. And there's another way of creating styles. For example, if I go into my style component here and just type in here, let's see, style, and the way you use now inline styling here. So this basic inline styling is you need to type it within curly brackets. So it's basically an object, then once more curly brackets, and then just let's see here color, and then use quotation marks and red, and there we go. So this is the way. If you want to type it another way, another type of style, then let's say here font, let's say font size and 900. Okay, so that's pretty bold. Let's also change this background. This is perfect. Background is not back. If you want to change the background color, you need to type it in with hyphen. So background and then hyphen. Camel case color, not hyphen. The capital letter, let's just say is going to be black. Okay, there we go. So there's a third way of using styles in React, and that is by basically creating variables for this. So if I want to use everything that I typed in here, just copy it or cut it out. Just leave the first curly bracket, and let's just say here const and my style, no, my h1 style is equal to, paste it in here, copy this, paste it in here, and there we go. So still inline style, just another way. And there's also by using style components, that is a component in React. I'm not going to go into that one, or using frameworks like Tailwind CSS or Bootstrap. I'm going to use Tailwind CSS a bit later on in this series, of course. Now, next up, I'm going to show you conditional rendering, and I'm going to create for this a new component. So, by the way, there's something here. You can also create components just right within here. For example, just going to create a const. Let's call it dashboard, and it's going to be equal to, let's say, an h1 of dashboard, just the text dash, and then I'm going to create another one called log in. This is going to be equal to, once more, an h1 with the text of login. So we have two components which are not in the folder of components, but I just want to illustrate the fact that in your main application you could also create components here, but these are simple components. So I wouldn't suggest creating them this way. Oops, wait just a second. You have to create here function. Also illustrate that you can also create components like this, so without using the keyword function, but you still need to export them. You're using defined components, you need to export those. Also, let's close up that app.css. You can also see the colors changes, so this is not a variable, it's actually a component. Still a functional component, but it's using an arrow function and it's assigned to a variable. Let me stop this count. I'm going to comment it out. So let's use these components by conditioning them. For this, I'm going to create up here a new state, const, and I'm now going to ask the question is logged in and set is logged in, and assign it to the state of false. So initially, for example, the user is not logged in. When you want to log into some kind of site, you're initially not logged in. That's what cookies are for. You want to be automatically logged in. Now, if the user is not logged in, for example, I'm just going to open and close curly brackets here. I'm going to use is logged in. If this is true, then show me the component of dashboard. If not, I'm going to use a column, so question mark, and then column, then show me logged in or login component. So let's see what happens if I hit save. Well, obviously login will appear because the user is not logged in because the state up here is false. I'm not going to go over the entire login process, but what I'm going to do is create here a button, and this button is going to call toggle login. Now within the button, I'm going to use an onClick event. Again, I'm going to use here an arrow function, and now use the setter set login. Now this setter, open close parenthesis, will take the initial state of is logged in, and I'm going to use a negation. Goes up the left part so the Explorer so you can see more. I'm going to use here an exclamation box. So I'm going to say if it's not login, then turn it off whatever this is negated. So just negate it. Constantly negate of whatever the state is. So if I'm using double negation, you know, logic is that one negation, not a negation. If I negate a negation, then it's an affirmative. So if I negate false with another false, it's going to result in true. So if I click now on toggle login, it's going to show me the dashboard. If I click it once more, it's going to negate my true sentence and it's going to turn it to false. So this is just going to trigger whatever is opposite to log in. And then if this is true, so is logged in is true, it's going to show me login. If not, it's going to show me dashboard. Or actually the other way around. If login is true, it's going to show me dashboard. And if not, it's going to show me login. Let me just refresh here. So we're back to the initial state of false, not logged in. Login should appear, the text here. So I'm going to click on login or toggle login and dashboard will appear. Now, there's also another way of using this. And by the way, a best practice tip is this should only be used if you have a second state. If not, then you could write it. I'm just going to copy it and replace this with another component. So this was a ternary operator, but you could also use an ampersand or something that does not have another condition. So for example, I'm going to create here, I'm just copy this, change this to admin panel. So we have another component, this is called admin panel. I'm going to bring it in here and delete this little fella. And instead of this question mark, I'm just going to use a ampersand. And up here, I'm going to use, copy this, and let's change it to has access. And here set has access. Okay, we're going to leave it initially as false. Copy the button and set that has access. I'm going to use here as access. Toggle access. Comment out the first button, and there we go. So admin panel not showing because this is false, and it doesn't show anything else. So what this does is basically stop the operation as soon as this is false. So if this is true, is not logged in. If this has access, sorry about that. So if has access is true, admin panel should be shown. The state of has access is false, so it's not showing. So if I trigger it, it shows. If I untrigger it, untriggered. If I deactivate it, then it will not be shown because the default value of whatever comes after this is null. So it's not undefined, but it's null. I can do the same thing, do it like this, and it's the same effect, but it's much shorter doing it like this. So only show has only show in the admin panel if this is true. If it's not true, don't do anything. So much shorter than typing in another value like here for a ternary operator as null. Okay, now let's move to lists and keys. Now, basically a list in React is whatever normally is used on arrays, and normally you would use then a map in order to show the list, and then different operators on it like filters and so forth and so on in order to manipulate that list. Now, in order to understand we're going to show you how the list works, but if you want to learn more about higher order array methods, because these are actually array methods, filter, find, and so forth and so on. Map is also higher order array method. I have a complete detailed explication for each one of them on my YouTube channel, so check them out. So let's go ahead and up here, create a list. We're going to use const and type it items, assign them to a array of strings, and we're going to use here a for the first item, comma, string of b, comma, string of c, comma, string of d, and that's it. So let's show each and every item here in a unordered list. For example, if I'm going to use here an unordered list, ul and li, and the first li should be an a. This is the good old way to show them, and then b, so forth and so on. But I actually want to try and fetch data. So what I'm going to do here is, instead of this, I'm going to take now my item, open and close curly brackets, my items dot map. I'm going to use the array method of map on it, and from this I'm going to extract each and every item, comma, the index. I'm going to show you just a couple of seconds why this is important. So on each and every item and the index, then use an arrow function. Now take each and every item, pass them into an li, so open and close li, and here I'm going to display each and every item. Okay, and there we go, A, B, C, D. Simple as that. Now what is up with this index? Because this is an array, you know that each and every value, let me right click, go to the console, and two things. You're going to see, first of all, a error here that each child in a list should have a unique key property. So I'm going to assign to them, I'm going to assign to each one of them a key. And I'm going to use the index, which you shouldn't use, for the key. Normally you should use, this is a pro tip, you should use generated IDs, unique IDs. For each item should have a unique ID in order to later on use CRUD method on them. CRUD meaning create, update, delete, so on and so on. So if I would console log here each and every item, and I would need to pass this into, let me do it up here. Console log each and every item, the array of items. You will see up here the array of A, B, C, D with the indexes assigned to them. Hope you understand what these are. Each and every item in the index starts with 0, then 1, and 2, and 3. Now you can take those indexes basically down here and assign them as keys. So if I go ahead now and type in the prop key, as soon as you use the map method, each and every element will have automatically assigned the property, the default property of key to it. If I type in here index, then you will see this little arrow disappear, and instead we're going to have for each and every item the key of its index. Okay, so one last thing I want to show you here, then we're going to end this crash course for now. In the next video, I'm going to create a complete, actually two things. I'm going to show you how the folder structure should work. And then in the next video, we're going to create a project where I'm going to take you step by step how a React application should be created. So normally, and I'm going to just put this up on the screen. Normally, you should have a folder structure. This is just messed up here. Normally, you should have a folder structure like this. So you should have your source. Within here should be components, a button and header, an alert, and so forth and so on. Then you should have your pages, home, about page, then your hooks. You create your styles, your app.js, and your index.js. So all of these items, logo, SVG, you can actually delete them. Setup test, delete it. Report, delete it. App.test, delete it. Index CSS, you can also delete this one. Now you still need to clean this up, so you could go back to your index.js file. This is looking for the import of index.css. Clean up. Save this report down here. You can also delete this, delete the import of it. You can always see that this is working once more. Now your style is all messed up because we are missing major components, major styling. So if I would just put this one in, that is going to restyle this, or change the font family to this, that's going to change the font family, and so forth and so on. So this is kind of how a basic structure looks, and we're going to create another one in the upcoming project, and then we're going to deploy that project, use forms, and much more to come. But this is enough for now for basic React. Okay, so my name is Norbert. See you in the next one. Bye-bye.